Hello, it's Matt over at Rackform. So thank you so much for the questions. I may need to know a little bit more about the first one where we are kind of talking about relational tables. But I was going to give a quick demo of that, and then also I should be able to answer straight away the second question about the entry viewer. But let me just kind of tackle the first one first, which is the storing data in multiple relational tables. So when we have a form, as I'm going to just build a very simple one right here, so I'll add a form page, 2 text fields, a submit button, and a submission button. When we have something like this, we can use the Rackforms a wizard to essentially write to a database. So I'm looking at a MySQL database right here, and I can literally just select my form somewhere, right click, and say SQL plus Automator. I'll select the database type I have. So we support MySQL, MS SQL, and Postgres, but for now I'll just use MySQL. And basically I can just say, what is the name of the table I want to create? You'll notice here that I actually can rename form fields, actually tell them what type of data they are, etc. But basically, I can just say, hey, Rackforms, you go ahead and create a table and add the SQL plus insert item for me. And when I do that, it's actually going to do 2 things. It's going to create the SQL plus item here to write the information to a database, and then it's also going to create that table for me. So here it is, unit align toolbar has been created. You'll actually notice here that it took the 2 text fields that I had, so text field essentially 1 and 2, and then also added a primary key field. So it added this ID field here for me. So in theory then, if I run this job and I submit the form, so I'll put 1 and 2, when I look at the database, I'll see that record has been added along with a primary key. Now, if I had multiple tables I wanted to write to, the one really handy feature that we have here is this set last insert ID equals retval. Basically, what this would allow me to do is perform a second database insert. I'm just literally going to copy this guy and just kind of work with the second one. And I could actually say the value for text 1, so I'm just going to do a contrived example here, but I just want to kind of show you the insert here. But basically, I can say only insert into the text 1 field, and the value that you're going to put in is indeed this retval PHP value. And so you'll notice here I'm using a token. So in Rackforms, we have this concept here of when I want to get some kind of complex value, even if it's just a single PHP variable, I use the token in the form that you see here. So in this case, it's a PHP variable, and it's $, and then in between the braces, it's PHP, or excuse me, the variable name. So you'll notice here I'm using F, that stands for form field. So I have form field called text1, form field called text2, etc. But here I'm just basically going to say, take the last insert ID, return that in a PHP variable called retval, and then just insert that into the database. So I should run this now. If all goes well, I should say 3 and 4, and when I submit, I should have 2 records added. The first one is going to be that 3 and 4, and then the second one is just going to be the last insert ID, which is 2. Right? So it took that ID value and put it right there. So we can use that then to join multiple tables together. Now, the thing that's kind of interesting about the way Rackforms does this is, let's say I actually had a second form page right here, and I had a couple additional fields, and I actually wanted to create, let's say, a relational table structure based on this. In other words, 2 separate tables for my fields. So I can literally do that as well. I'd right-click again on my first page here, and then under MySQL plus Automator, I would just say entire job plus an index table. And unlike the first time when we click table index plus item, I'm going to create the entire job along with that index table. And what's neat about this then is I'm going to insert into an index table, and then I'm going to use that that entry ID value for both of the tables that I'm writing to. So on and so forth. So we have, and by the way, I didn't want to go too deep into this right now. I just want to show you it's possible. But basically, Rackforms is creating multiple tables now. Toolbar 0, toolbar 1. You'll see here that here's the index table. There's 0 and 1. Basically creating related tables for us. It's not always to say that's what you need to do, but it's there if we need it as an option. Finally, on the second question, as far as where Rackforms saves the information in the database, so it actually goes into FB job entries. This is an example of just some sample entries that we have right here, and it uses a kind of a specific format right here that may not always be useful for you to kind of pull data out of. Basically, we have a job ID, which is essentially like the internal job number that it has, and then we have this, let's see, we have where is it here? The entry key. So basically, whenever we build a job in Rack Forms and somebody visits that form page, we generate a unique identifier for that entry, and it's called the entry key. And so basically, a single form entry would be something like this. I would find the first entrance in the entry key that's unique. I'd go all the way down to where that entry key is no longer unique, and this is what constitutes a single entry for that form. In other words, it's a flat format, so it's a lot of times not very useful for you to use in terms of like you kind of have to parse this out for it to be any of use. Of course, it's really useful for the way Rack Forms processes stuff, but it's always not useful for you. But it is there, and we have things like file data. So if we uploaded an image, we actually have the image that we took. We have the actual data for any of the individual fields that we had, etc. So that's where it is. It's FB job entries. Again, I don't know if it's going to be a lot of use to you, but it would be there if we need it. So I'll leave it at that for now. Any follow-up questions, as I'm sure you'll probably have, please let me know. Always happy to help.